Good evening, everyone. It is 6:37 on Wednesday, August 30th. This is the Select Board, and we are starting our meeting in open session, but expect to go into executive session should the board so choose. So I call this meeting to order, and I will have I always forget. I have to read the reasons first, excuse me. Item A, approved meeting minutes of July 18th, 2023. A, pursuant to Mass General Laws 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Trustees of Boston University versus Town of Natick, number 2281 CV 03404. Item B, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Town Administrator, Fire Chief, Police Chief. Item C, pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I declare all three of those.
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Sidney, seconded by Ms. Pope. I have to do a roll call. Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Pope?
Yes.
Ms. Coughlin?
Yes.
Let us start by Mr. Sidney.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so 5-0-0. So we'll be going into exec session now. We should be back hopefully right before 8 o'clock. So we'll now be in exec session for that period. So tune in later. Start it again. That's not going to work. Maybe that'll work. It is now 7:53. We're back from executive session. So for those in the room, let's please stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so announcements. We've a couple. I would like to invite Mr. Ostroff to the podium, who has the first two of those items. And if you could please identify yourself and Athena for the few people who do not know you.
I will not read a bio. Thank you. Josh Ostroff. I am the chair of the Cochituate Rail Trail Advisory Committee. I'm on the board of the Friends of Natick Trails, and I'm joined here by
Athena Pandolf, director of the Natick Center Cultural District. So this is a little project that we've been working on.
So you may recall having approved, subject to administrative approval, an art exhibition on the Cochituate Rail Trail, which is organized by Studios Without Walls, and it's jointly presented by the Friends of Natick Trails and the Natick Center Cultural District. So we're really excited and are very appreciative of all the work of town staff and volunteers to help bring this together. So from September 9th to October 15th, there will be a dozen sculptures on the CRT. And more information is available about this already. Thank you to town staff for putting it on the town webpage. This is free public exhibit of work that had previously been shown in Brookline and Riverway Park. A lot of it is well, I hope you find all of it enjoyable and of high quality. It'll be up for 5 or 6 weeks, and we just hope the public has the opportunity to experience and enjoy it. We need more public art in our public spaces, and this is a great way to do it. And just want to thank the partnership of Natick Center Cultural District for all the great work that Athena has been able to lead. So.
Thank you. And I just want to add that there will be some tours, and so there'll be some documentation at the site. There are some art treasure hunts for kids and families to look at. So all of that will be available on the trail. And it is actually, just so people know where it's located, it's between the Chrysler Road and the Superior Drive section of the CRT. And so we really hope that people will come out. These are 12 amazing artists. One of them is actually a Natick artist, Rebecca McGee Tuck, who's the one that brought this to our attention. And so she really had a passion to bring it to Natick. So we're very grateful to the town for all of your help and assistance, and Jamie, and also just Josh for this partnership with the Friends of the Trail. So thank you so much, and we hope that everyone comes out and visits.
Just add one last thing. Thank you to the AMVETS Post 79 for providing some public parking for this exhibit. It's typically members only, but they've graciously agreed to allow some parking for folks that may not want to walk the full length of the trail from Natick Center or Saxonville to be able to get access to it. But thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Should I turn around and...
Yeah.
The next announcement, Mr. Chair and board members, is to announce an event that we're doing in collaboration with town staff called All Aboard. About a year ago, the town applied to the Metro West Health Foundation and subsequently to the MathWorks Community Foundation to help start an accessible and adaptive cycling program. What this means is for people with physical limitations or disabilities, it's an opportunity to get on a bike, maybe an adaptive tricycle or other vehicle, and experience it for a day. We had originally thought of procuring 1 or 2 bikes, but through the leadership of working with John Marshall and Susan Ramsey, folks in community services and administration, we decided to instead bring in a company with a lot of expertise called All Out Adventures. They're based in Northampton, but they do adaptive recreational programs all over the state. In fact, they do adaptive kayaking at Kitchitchewit State Park. So on September 30th, a rain date of October 1st, we'll be setting up at the new Mechanic Street lot on the rail trail, and that will be an opportunity for people who have made reservations to use a bike that's just right for them. Could be kids, could be adults, with whatever mobility limitations there may be. We're also looking for volunteers on that. So I think that more information about that will be on the town website. There will be information at the friendsofnaticktrails.org site, or if folks want to write down this URL, is.gd/allaboardnatick. And that will take you to a form where you can sign up to register to participate or as a volunteer. And we're grateful to have volunteers to do this. And so just a special thanks to the 2 foundations, the Metro West Health Foundation and the MathWorks Community Foundation, for making this possible. We'll see where this goes from here, what kind of appetite and interest there is, what kinds of vehicles work best. And hope that that is a successful opportunity for all concerned. I want to thank town staff for their participation in this as well. I don't have any other announcements. I'm sorry. Hey, I know you've got a long agenda too, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oster. Any announcements, Ms. Pope?
First of all, I just wanted to say thank you, both Josh and Athena, for these events that you're putting together for the community. Appreciate it. And my question was about volunteers. Could you just give a little bit, Josh, of what are you looking for in a volunteer?
Thank you so much for that question, Ms. Pope. So for volunteers for the accessible cycling event, the people at All Out Adventures, they're bringing a box truck with like 15 or so different cycles of all types. And they have the expertise to really train people up, whether it's a caregiver or rider. We will be looking for volunteers to help organize parking or to sign people in to do more of the administrative work. Just to make this a successful event. If we had 10 people over the course of 5 or 6 hours, that would be great. So folks should just do it. But also, even if you couldn't participate, go to that website and sign up to let us know, because we want to be in touch and make sure that we're working with folks to provide the kind of opportunities, outdoor opportunities that people want. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
You bet.
Just a quick announcement to remind people that tomorrow is International Overdose Awareness Day. And the International Overdose Awareness Day 2023 theme is recognizing those people who go unseen, about those people in our communities who are affected by overdose, but we don't necessarily know. The emphasis has always been on the grief of family and friends left behind, but I want us to also remember our first responders who experience and see and have to deal with overdose much more often than maybe you or me. So if you want to know more about the Awareness Day, tools, things to do, and how you can support the community, you can go to overdoseday.com, and there are resources there. So the actual day is tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Coughlin. I just wanted to say something about the accessible cycling. I wasn't sure of the date because I didn't have the flyer in front of me. It is September 30th, 2023, so if you're looking to volunteer that day, that would be great. It's from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., a rain date of Sunday, October 1st, the next day, same time, 10 a.m., 3 p.m. With that, anything else from the board? This direction.
Two brief announcements, and then I have some updates for the board that I'll do later. Just briefly for an announcement, South Main Street, it's the section of Main Street that extends from basically Cottage Street to the Sherburne Town Line, will be finally getting its final pavement. It's tentatively scheduled to start September 5th through the 7th. The Public Works Department, in partnership with the Police Department, the School Department, and others in town, have been working to coordinate how detours will be working. School did just start today, so we are very well aware that there's school traffic that's going to be ongoing along that street. But we do want to make sure that we accommodate this project because it's a final pavement along with the final sidewalks and everything for that work. All of that's going to be subject to our lovely weather that we've had this summer. So if it is raining, it might get delayed a day or two. But I just want everybody to know that that is going to be planned for next week with appropriate detours and signage and everything that's going to be up there, plus public safety officials who can help adjust real time during the day if there's issues. Second is, and this is just live off the wire, the Healy-Driscoll administration made grants, announced grants just today regarding climate resiliency, and the town of Natick received $290,000 for a climate resilient park design along in South Natick, along the Charles River. So that's a huge just benefit for the town, recognition of our need for climate resiliency in South Natick. I see Jillian Wilson-Martin here, who was part of the team that worked on putting that grant together. She'll be speaking to you later about something else, but I just want to make that announcement because it's a great testament to the work of the staff. And that's all for now.
Thank you. No one else? Okay, moving on to public speak. Any individual may raise an issue that's not included on the agenda, and it will be taken under advisement by the board. There'll be no opportunity for debate during this portion of the meeting. This section is limited to 15 minutes, and any individual addressing the board during this section is limited to 5 minutes. Could I get a show of hands in the room for people who want to do public speak? 1, 2. Any online? I don't see any online. Okay. So, Mr. Scott, you go first. I saw your hand first. And please introduce yourself for the public.
Roger Scott, 40 Water Street. Last night we had a meeting down at the Senior Center regarding the proposed Auburn Street development. It was put on by Metro West Collaborative, and they were set up unusually in 5 different tables, so it really didn't provide for a good interpretation of what questions would all the people be asking, because they were spread out. You might be in a group of 3 or 4 people. So with that being said, I do want to say my biggest concern was that the select board had, by a 3-2 vote, accepted their agreement, and there were going to be 32 units that were going to be built at the end of that street. I know it's all done as far as that goes, but it still has other issues to deal with. I am concerned, so I actually went ahead and presented an article that will hopefully get before town meeting. It's called Article 23, and it's basically called "To Ensure the Safety of Residents Living on Dead-End Streets." So this would pertain to all of Natick that has, and this the wording would be, to see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaws to limit the number of new housing units that can be built on a residential street consisting of 5 or fewer existing single-family residences to a maximum of 15 units, or to take any other action with respect thereto. So we collected the signatures on that. Pass this into the select board, and then I've got a notification from the finance committee that this might not be able to be on there. There might have to be some hearings ahead of this, and I just don't want to have this overlooked as far as safety goes. And that goes for any part of Natick. I think it's very essential. We have firemen and policemen and all these EMTs. We have all of these people that are trying to help us all out, and I just don't want to make it as difficult as it can be when you put no limit. Basically, 32 units is a pretty good project on a small street, and you could observe that. But that could be on any street in town, and the way things are going nowadays, who knows what your neighbor plans to do on the end of your street. So I just there should be something, and this hopefully would have gone through town meeting and would have been passed, that there'd be a limit to that number of units that could be built on a street. And it would have been nice to have the fire chief ahead of time to be able to have that information as how he feels about the situation, and will the people on that street be protected, or any street in Natick that are under the same circumstance. So I appreciate this moment to be able to speak. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Golden, did I see your hand? Sure. Again, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, town manager, and the public viewing this meeting tonight. My name is Peter Golden. I'm a resident of the community and reside at 5 Vermont Avenue. I stand before you this evening to speak to the issue of the Thomas Soren House.
Mr. Golden, let me...
Please.
There. Since that item is on the agenda, I will be calling on you at that time.
I appreciate that.
Brought up on the agenda. So let's move on.
Of course. Can you give me a sense of when that will occur?
That will occur 8:45 is my guess. Yeah, it's about the middle of the discussion and decision section of ours.
8:45, you said?
45, yeah.
Thank you for your patience and correction.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No problem.
Okay, any others to public speak? No? Okay, let's move on to appointments. We have interviews and appointments to the Council on Aging. Alan Blevins and Paula Panchuk. Are they here? Good. Paula's online, okay. Shall we go ladies first? Let's do ladies first. Sorry.
Okay.
Or Alan, I'm sorry, I just misread. Okay, if you would be kind enough, Paula, to just tell us a little bit about your background. We got all your resume and your interest. If you could describe to the board why you think you're a good fit to be appointed to the Council on Aging.
Well, I'll start with the fact that I was born and raised in Natick, and I have lived here all my life. And therefore, having been part of the public school system, sent a child through the school system, I have a lot of very positive feeling about living in Natick. I'm very proud of that. In terms of being on a committee, I've served on a number of both select board appointed committees as well as others, and I really enjoy that engagement. And I have attended some of the Council on Aging meetings recently and find them to be a very thoughtful and engaged board with which I'd enjoy interacting. Now that I'm in the middle of an aging process myself, I can say that it's been almost a lifelong interest in aging, especially as part of my doctoral studies that focused on adult development and aging, so that it sort of has always made me very sensitive to what some of the developmental things are, what our interests, what our needs that people have as they age. In addition to that, I spent a number of years as the executive director and dean of a continuing care retirement community on the campus of LaSalle University, LaSalle Village. And I think that experience would help me to contribute to the work of the committee, to lend an ear to what the issues are that are being discussed, and hopefully to offer some good sense comments on those issues. So I would really look forward to being part of the Council on Aging.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? No? Okay. Mr. Sidney.
Just based on her resume, remarkably qualified individual for this position. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you for volunteering, Paula.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Do we want to take a vote to appoint before that? And these are both open, or two open positions, Jamie?
Let me confirm that.
Yeah, before we take a vote. Okay, but meanwhile, let's move on to Alan, if you could introduce yourself and tell us why you'd like to be on the Council of Aging.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Good evening. I'm Alan Blevins. I live at 30 Church Street, right down the way. Thought it appropriate for me to appear in person since I'm just 2 minutes, two blocks away, not actually Zoom in. I'm interested in being on the Council of Aging because I'm also attempting to mature gracefully into the town of Natick. I love being here. I've been a resident for over 4 years, and I am currently the team commander and chaplain for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of the Secretary for New England, and I'm willing and able to serve and be glad to answer any questions.
Excellent. Any questions, comments, the board? Is it two? Yeah, okay. Do we have any motions? Let me first say that it's always gratifying when we can find candidates who are so superbly aligned with what the needs are for a given committee, and I can't think of better fits in both cases. So I hope my colleagues concur, but I think they probably do.
Move to appoint both Paula Panchuk and Alan Blevins to the Council on Aging.
Before we take a second, I'd like a moment to enter into discussion and also thank the volunteers who have stepped up. Your backgrounds are extraordinary, and thank you for choosing to serve Natick.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a motion from Mr. Sidney to approve both Paula and Alan. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. 5-0. Thank you very much for stepping up and being willing to serve. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you all for what you do, too.
Okay, sorry, pages are sticking together. Okay. Do I have any select board updates that we haven't addressed earlier?
Somewhat of an update. So Mr. Scott spoke to this, that we had the Meet the Developer for 5 Auburn last night at the Senior Center, and it was great to have this session, make sure that it was public, make sure that people knew about it, talk to neighbors and, hear what they were feeling. And one of the things that came up, and this has come up sometimes before in different processes, is that some people didn't know. They didn't know about the earlier process before the vote. And I don't think there is ever going to be a perfect situation where everybody knows all of the time. But one of the things I wanted to convey was that we do have now a communications director that works for the town of Natick that is working on outreach and communications channels and infrastructure and processes. And so as the process goes on, there is, I would say, a commitment to making sure that the process is public and people are as aware as possible. And so people should expect that they'll be made aware, that they'll know what's going on as the process with 5 Auburn goes forward, and beyond that with other processes that are happening. So I just wanted to let people know that there is a commitment and an effort to make great strides in communication and outreach to our community about these very important things that are going on.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. I wanted to follow up on your point there, and thank you for bringing that up. One correction, when we did take the vote, it was a 3-2 vote to award the RFP to Metro West Collaborative Development, but to enter the development agreement, it was a 5-0 vote, just to clarify that. This fall, Metro West Collaborative Development intends to apply to the ZBA for a comprehensive permit. Prior to that application, the Select Board will be notified as the project details. And so one of the things that we will learn is exactly what this is going to look like. We put a lot of conditions into the development agreement to reflect some of the needs of the neighborhood. So we did take those into account. It included taking into account the built context where the site's related, preserve the historic integrity of the building while minimizing impacts to the surrounding landscape and neighborhood. So there's a checklist of items that need to be gone through as that process unfolds. And there are a number of checks and balances. Public safety is one. The Historic District Commission, because it's in a historic district, will weigh in on it. So this is the beginning of the process, and I urge abutters, neighbors, interested parties to continue to stay involved in that process. So thank you for that. Did you have something, Rich?
Thanks. Change of topic. I attended the CBRC meeting last night where the CBRC discussed some possible changes that they're thinking about under their warrant article, under their charter warrant article, changes to charters articles 3, 4, 6, and 7. The changes are still in draft. There was a bunch of discussion among the committee about some of the wording of some of the changes and things like that. It's still a work in progress, but they really are focusing on getting motions together. One of the things that they discussed was creating a subcommittee to work with the Select Board to make sure that our needs are met and that the motions and texts that they're proposing will be what we've talked to them about, and their chair will be working with our chair to set that up. So I've sent a more detailed report to the chair, so it's all in public, and the meeting was recorded for people who want to watch it.
Thank you, Mr. Sidney. Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess more in an announcement of thanks to Mr. Smith for just a great event. I don't know if you were planning to.
No, go.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank both Troy Smith, our Community Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Outreach, for pulling together, I thought, a very well done and compelling forum to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington this past Saturday. It was also in conjunction with Natick's Multicultural Day, which I'm sorry Ms. Pandolf has left the room, but Athena, working with many different groups in the community, brought together what I thought was a fantastic celebration. If you were in Natick Center on Saturday, you saw probably the heart and soul of this community within 5 compacted hours, between the farmers market starting the day, the march that we had replicated around the common to the library to celebrate the 60th, and then the multicultural celebration. So it was just a tremendous day all around, but I do want to give kudos in particular to Mr. Smith for really bringing people together and just jumping into his role, and I think really doing a great job reaching out to the community. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. You also jogged my memory about the Natick Day that I'm forgetting the Fox. What was the Fox Day called? Zip Trip. Zip Trip. Thank you. Wanted to call out Jay's work on that because he did a tremendous job, as well as coordinating with Athena. As you may recall, that was beyond a monsoon day. It was torrential rain for at least part of that, and they still pulled it off together. I think Jay was soaked for the rest of the day, but he did a tremendous job, and both Jay and Athena pointed to each other and said what a terrific job they each had done. So great stuff. Okay, let's move on finally to discussion and decision, and Chief Hicks and Sergeant promotions. So.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. As you're aware, one of the authority, the biggest authority I think you have as a member of the board is as appointing authority at the police department. And with that, you have the opportunity to make several appointments, and especially important ones, such as advancement in careers, which includes promotions. And tonight, I'm in front of you as the appointing authority making a request to promote 2 officers to the position of sergeant. And they are Officer Christopher Salas and Officer Christian Rodriguez. All of you received the full bio, but I'm just going to do a highlight of those areas as to why we're making this appointment, this recommendation to you this evening. Officer Salas, I'm going to have you go on this side.
Sure.
Not high, but we went to cameras to see you. Oh. Officer Salas has been a police officer in the town of Natick for 22 years. He began serving the town as a member of the auxiliary police department in 1990. During his career with the Natick Police Department, he has supported the operation of the organization as a police prosecutor for 4 years, as well as field training officer, drug recognition expert, radar LiDAR instructor, and a lead instructor for the Municipal Police Training Committee for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Officer Salas holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in criminal justice. During our process, which includes an interview, he described his style of supervision as a coach and mentor. And it was very clear we feel that this style would help the organization, given the current staff is very young. Improving communications within the organization is what he recommends and says would be his primary focus as a new supervisor. The next one I'm recommending is Officer Christian Rodriguez. They can stay over here. They don't like the camera. I don't know what it is. Yeah, shy. Officer Rodriguez, as many know around the community, has been in law enforcement for 23 years, beginning his career briefly with Natick, then transferring to the Miami-Dade Police Department, and eventually showing wisdom and returning to the Natick Police Department in 2003. Prior to joining law enforcement, he worked in the adolescence care field as a counselor. He earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in education for counseling. He is able to apply his education and skills as a police officer to develop his personal characteristics, one is being empathy and helping. In Natick, he found the perfect position as juvenile detective and school resource officer at the high school and the middle school. He was able to connect with students and had a tremendous impact on the lives of many students of diverse backgrounds in the Natick school system. He was so connected with the students and the youth in the community that he actually left us and went to the school department as a guidance counselor. But again, wisdom. And that was short-lived, and he returned back to the police department in 2021. One important thing is about Officer Rodriguez Christian is with his degrees in counseling and as well as his bilingual skills is what is needed in the law enforcement field in this day and age. And we look forward in the current environment and for the future for him with Natick. Mr. Chair, I do recommend these both be appointed effective September 6th, and for the members to also understand by making these appointments, I am recommend a bypass, and the bypass is for Officer Andrew Watkins.
Thank you, Chief. Questions from the board?
As a point of order, I believe we need 2 motions.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. We do. One is the appointments and one is the bypass, right?
I was the board's representative at the interviews this time, and I was extremely impressed by what these 2 officers brought, and I am happy to support these recommendations completely. They are exceptional choices.
So I think we can give you the motion to start then.
Okay.
Do I have a seconder? No?
Do we need to move to bypass before we move approval for the 2?
I'm not sure of the sequence.
Go
I
ahead.
thought it was second, yeah.
It go either way,
Okay.
as long as the vote's recorded.
Okay. And seconded by Mr. Joseph. All in favor, say aye.
Oh, in discussion?
I'm sorry.
If I may, so thank you, Chief, and thank you to the 2 officers. We really appreciate your dedication to the community. I just want to recall a couple of words in your descriptions of these 2 officers: coaching, mentorship, counseling. This is the police department of 2023 and moving forward. I see some of your peers in the back in support of tonight, and just with gratitude to how complex this job is. You know, amid a very confusing and time coming out of COVID in particular, promoting leaders within the department with those skills is of note, and I just wanted to emphasize that. You know, I think you're looking at the new organization structure going into place and some new officers coming into the mix, being led by some of, and I see several in the room, of many years of tenure here in Natick, and I think the community should be proud and recognize the hard work that they do. So thank you.
I'm going to put a former select board member on the spot here because he had some very nice comments that he sent by email. And I'm going to give him the opportunity to come to the podium if he wants. If not, I never found you to have be at a loss for words.
You know, Kurt Schilling craved the red light, just saying. That's
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I appreciate it. I know your schedule is busy and you have a lot of catching up to do. You have, in my humble opinion, 2 very fine candidates before you this evening. You have a lot of difficult decisions. I would think this might be one that isn't so difficult, and I encourage you to act on the chief's recommendation and move on with confidence that you have 2 very capable and qualified individuals who will make the town proud. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hickey. Now back to that vote. We didn't take that vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Mr. Shigorin put his hand up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Shikori, I didn't see you.
I'm sorry.
Please help yourself.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rich.
Good evening. My name is Edward Chigori. I live at 8 Auburn Street here in Natick. I've personally known and observed Officer Rodriguez for over a decade. I first observed him during the so-called Beer Summit incident in the town of Natick, coincidentally at 5 Auburn Street. I personally observed him when a person from Cambridge came out in a T-car, dropped off something of very questionable substance, and Officer Rodriguez handled it summarily in an excellent fashion. In addition, I want you to know I've observed Officer Rodriguez in several different situations. I've observed him as an SRO at Wilson. The kids loved him. They respected him. They looked up to him. That's the type of cop we need as a sergeant. In addition, I observed him as an SRO at the high school. Again, the students liked him. They looked up to him. Candidly, they went to him for advice. Again, this is the type of cop we need as a sergeant. You know, he holds not only a college degree, but 2 advanced degrees directly related to law enforcement. And he's multilingual. One other point. I strongly believe in family values. I've known his wife and children. I had the children as students. I've also observed his wife when she worked at Natick High School. You need family support, particularly as a police officer, particularly when they're working, I don't mean this disrespectfully, Chief, weird hours. So without question, I recommend Officer Rodriguez to the rank of sergeant. Let me tell you about Officer Salas. He is a genius on motor vehicle offenses. He knows more than any lawyer I know when it comes to motor vehicle offenses. Great choices, Chief. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shigori.
Thank you. Now let's get to that vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, on to the, yeah. We got to do that first.
I just want to take a moment and say thank you very much. Thank you for my wife's support. She's been up with me all those nights working. My parents who are watching at home, they couldn't be here tonight. And thank the board for having the faith in me to do the job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, Select Board, and also to my wife, Michelle, 23 years, and my son, CJ, and Gabby. As us all officers know, we work a lot and sacrifice our families, and if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here. And I also want to thank all my colleagues, present and past. They've meant a lot to me and in my development as a police officer, and I look forward to working with them as a sergeant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Congratulations, Christian. Good, great.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, move the bypass of Officer Watkins.
Okay, and that was moved by Mr. Sidney. Do I have a seconder on the bypass?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Pope. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, let's move on to Safety Committee updates. Chief Hicks.
Thank you. Wait for the noisy crowd to file out.
Wait for the filing out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I was asked to come this evening and give a brief explanation of safety committee procedures. I've had an opportunity to speak to Select Board Member Coughlin about this issue, and the request was to give the board just an idea of what happens with safety committee recommendations to implementation. I think there's been some discussion, maybe some confusion, and lack of knowledge. So I'm here to do that this evening. Just so the board members know, as the road commissioners, you have the responsibility of a lot of the work and decisions that's made, especially around regulations as it relates to traffic enforcement and parking regulations. So what happens is the safety committee is a committee put together to make recommendations. So our role is not to make decisions. Our role is to make recommendations to you as the road commissioners. And those requests can come to us in many ways. It can come from staff. It can come from the police department, fire department. But most of the time, it comes from citizens. who has requests around several different issues around roadways, and it could be anything. It could be crosswalks, sidewalks, traffic flows, lights, street lights, anything and everything that could relate anything to safety. And we vet that. We vet that through the committee and the committee members. And so those who don't know, the committee members, the committee is made up of both public safety, police and fire, DPW, we have school members, including transportation. We have 3 citizens appointees, and all the appointees are from the town administrator that make up the safety committees. Anyone I missed along the way. So the committee has a lot of knowledge and skills, especially from the town members, around implementation and work that needs to be done. So there's a lot of discussion that goes on. So what usually happens is a request comes forward to us. We vet through the requests and make a determination. Sometimes the request is to take no action. Meaning that there's no request to go forward with the request from the individual from town who's put it through. If there's a request that goes through that we make a recommendation, that will come to you as a board. And as you as a board have the final decision as the guidelines go. You can accept those decisions. If you accept those decisions, then, and this is a crucial part, and we say to those who brought it forward, then it's up to the town towards implementation. And sometimes you got to understand that implementation could require funding. And if it requires funding, and we make it clear to those who come, this is not a simple turnaround. Some of it is substantial funding. Like if there's a recommendation to put in a crosswalk. To put in a crosswalk requires a lot of engineering and a lot of construction, because based on the guidelines, it has to be tactile strips, there must be landing areas, all those things need to be considered. But as a safety committee, if we feel that it's necessary, we will put it out there. Then it goes on the list, for lack of a better term, as to where that funding may come from. And if it's an issue that obviously is a roadway issue, it goes to DPW for evaluation and consideration as they look at their budget. If it's something like a street light or signage like that, it goes to the fire department through Kitty Mitchell. So there's areas where these things take place. Specifically, as a good guidelines, we had 2 requests that Select Board Member Kaufman asked me to talk about specifically. One is Walnut Street, and Walnut Street has gone through that process I just explained. So Walnut Street, petitioner came in to look at reducing the speed limit on Walnut Street. And under the guidelines of this new state statute and approved by town meeting, the Select Board has the authority to lower speed limits in certain real areas of town. We evaluated Walnut Street and brought it forward to the Select Board. And the Select Board voted positively to have that happen, to reduce the speed limit on Walnut Street. Under the guidelines, it requires, because, and not to get too technical, but Walnut Street, in the area of Walnut Street we're looking at, is a special speed limit permit, meaning that many years ago, that roadway was brought in front of Mass DOT, it was a different name at the time, to evaluate the speed and what is considered to be the best speed for that roadway. There's a formula, there's engineering, there's all that sorts of things that go into it. If we choose, and you as a select board choose to lower or change that limit, you can approve that, you can do that, and then we have to inform Mass DOT that vote was taken. Mass DOT was sent a letter back in April to inform them and wait for their approval. And as of last week, Joan emailed them again. We have not heard back from them yet. So we're waiting to hear back from Mass DOT. Once we hear back from Mass DOT, then action can be taken to change the speed limit signage on that roadway. So there is a delay, but delay is waiting for a response from Mass DOT. The second one was Pleasant Street South, and doing our research, discovered there's a clerical error that was voted positively by the Safety Committee, but was never brought forward to the Select Board. And that's actually on your agenda tonight under the consent agenda. Once that's voted and approved tonight by the Select Board, we will again, that is also the area we're talking about on Pleasant Street is also has a special speed limit that was approved by the state. So we would have to send a letter to the state again to let them know and make them aware of the fact that that was voted by this group and this organization. We do have other streets that are on our agenda that's going to be coming in front of this board that do not have special speed limits, that more likely we will be making recommendations to change those speed limits. In those cases, under the guidelines, we only have to inform Mass DOT. We don't have to wait for them to respond back to them with our approval. So that's specifically around the areas that Select Board Member Coughlin wanted me to talk about in general specifically, but other areas are similar. So there are a lot of approvals that have come from this board, especially around safety signals at crosswalks that are on the list waiting to get budgeted. And they are in priorities, and we've had discussions with the town administrator about how those priorities are done. And if anyone has any questions.
Question. Mr. Sidney.
Yeah, there's you mentioned that the vetting process. Could you go into a little more detail about what the vetting process is for example, for a speed limit change? And you don't have to go into all of the different vetting, but that would be a good example to let us know what the background is.
So what was decided is, as we look at these individual roadways, we look at several different things. First of all, we do speed counts. We want to know that if there's actually an issue compared to some kinds of time, reality is not the same as the perception. So we do speed studies. A speed study gives us not only speed, but it also gives us traffic counts, how many vehicles travel that roadway. The other thing we look at is engineering. We look at the roadway based on reports from DPW. You know, if a street roadway that's 16 feet wide compared to a roadway that's 22 feet wide are two different types of roadway to look at. And also look at you know, how many houses on the way, roadway, if it's a roadway where there's a lot of foot traffic because there's no sidewalks, that makes a difference. Sometimes we may recommend sidewalks, but at the same time, the roadway may not even be wide enough to have sidewalks, or they're not on the priority. So those are all the type of things we look at to evaluate whether we would make a recommendation to change any speed limit, for instance. And we do the same thing for anything else that comes up, especially crosswalks. Crosswalks is important. I'm going to talk about that just for a quick second. We try to use the best practices as far as making sure crosswalks are in a location that is very visible. And I think we had our last debate over a crosswalk in the area that was a mid-block crosswalk, and that's something that we try to shy away from, because a mid-block crosswalk, meaning not at an intersection, is inherently not safe. Especially when in some roadways where the motoring public may be on one of those roadways that have a higher speed limit. So we are very conscious of that. And as I stated earlier, you can't just place paint on a street. There's guidelines. You got to have, especially on the ADA guidelines, you got to have landing areas. You have to have tactile strips. You have to have ability to have signage that indicates that there's a crosswalk. So there's a lot that goes into it when we start evaluating these different areas.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted the listening public to understand that your recommendations don't come out of vapor. There actually is data and study that goes into all of them.
Thank you, Mr. Stead.
Just a point of clarification. It is the case that many of the safety roadway suggestions or recommendations come from individuals in town, and that works its way through the safety committee, and the research is done and then it comes to us. But it's also the case that the board could recommend to the safety committee to look at particular areas of town to determine whether or not speed limit should be changed or there should be other safety accommodations.
Absolutely, and there has been suggestions that have come from the select board on several occasions to evaluate areas of concern.
Thank you.
Because you may get them from constituents that we may not get, because constituents don't know to come to the safety committee.
Right. Who got those? Any other questions?
Just, I guess, a point of order. Would this be an appropriate time to ask a specific question about a specific area, or if we're just talking process right now?
I think specific is fine.
Yeah, I think.
All right, on that note, any update on Campus Drive and Pond Street, given that school is back in session?
You mean the bike lanes?
Bike lanes, yep.
Sorry. So at the end of the school year last year and over the summer, engineering department has been doing some analysis out there. They actually put up some cones to further delineate the bike lanes. They do, my understanding is, want to see how the first part of the year works, because it was really a limited time that they could see things in action at the end of the year. And they'll work on some more permanent recommendations. It might be just keeping those cones up there and taking them down in the wintertime and then putting them back up during the better weather months. But there's also an intent to look at where it enters Pond Street and see if there can be either an improved painting program or some other type of program at that location. But again, I think they want to see some observations in the field along with members of the police department.
On that note, I walk and run that area fairly frequently. In the last 3 months, I've witnessed at least 2 buses going through the intersection without stopping, and that is of concern. The cones or pylons that are there marking the lane, I think, are down to 1 at this point. I don't know if they were removed or if they were taken out in an accident, so I just want to make sure that that's
We can
up to
check
date.
on that, yep.
And it didn't appear that the trimming along the side of the wall, the bike lane itself abuts a very steep embankment, and there is overgrowth that goes into the bike lane there. So again, for people's safety, I just want to make sure that that's tended to.
Which intersection are you talking about?
That's Campus Drive, going up the hill away from
Pond,
top.
Pond or the...
on Campus Drive, moving towards Pond Street.
Moving up towards
So the
Pond.
intersection right by the tennis courts, or...
Right, as you're coming
Yeah,
up
I
from
just want to make sure it
fishing
wasn't
hole.
that at the end.
Yeah, basically approaching Pond, on that uphill in
Okay.
particular. I still feel very strongly we should look at putting that bike lane onto the left side, not the right side there, just given the topography. But I'll leave that, again, to the experts, but it's an area that's of grave concern at that intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Anything else? Thank you, Chief. Sorry, Mr. Osler.
Thank you, board members. Josh Ostroff, former chair of the Transportation Advisory Committee. What I'm hearing is that the town doesn't really have policies here, that it's reactive, that requests for speed limit changes or crosswalks are submitted by residents to the safety committee and then brought forward to this board. What I have asked and will continue to ask this board is to fulfill your duty as road commissioners and to ask for a comprehensive strategy to deal with traffic conditions in Natick. This goes back to recommendations going back 10 or 15 years. It's implicated in the comprehensive plan, Natick 2030 plus. It would keep faith with the vote of town meeting to authorize the town to lower speed limits, and it would be consistent with good municipal practice to think about education, engineering, enforcement, to come up with a mobility plan that really works for all the residents of the community. It is on you as board members to ask the town administration to make that an action item, because otherwise you're just going to get these individual requests coming forward, and it's not strategic, it's not comprehensive, it's not what I think the board should be doing. You're the ones that are elected to do this, but I just want to be clear. I've been very patient getting things done in Natick. Sometimes it takes many years. However long it takes, I will be coming back to the board and I will be advocating for you to do what I think is the right thing and not just be reactive. Again, be proactive, ask for strategy, evaluate it. When there's staff resources, it can be fulfilled. And I realize that's always a limitation on anything that we do in municipal government. You know, I speak from long experience in Natick and from my day job doing this work in another municipality. It can be done. But if you're going to just, let whatever rises to the top become on your agenda and then have piecemeal follow through because it's not connected to, strategic or capital planning, I just don't think that serves the community well. I just want to be clear about that, my concerns about how we're moving forward with this.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other comments, questions? No? Let's move on now to, I had a request to move the Salwin House Committee update before specialized stretch code. Is that still true?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so Mr. Hoagland, do you want to come to the podium and introduce yourself and get us the...
I would be delighted to, sir. Thank you. Many of you know me, many of you don't. My name is Henry Hoagland. I live in Precinct 7. I've been a town meeting member since 1996. I've had 4 terms on the Natick School Committee, 6 years on the executive board at the Advanced Science Academy Charter School. I'm currently serving on the Natick Historical Commission and have a lot of interests. I became very interested in the Salwin House issue several years ago. Many of you may remember that this goes all the way back to almost 10 years ago. The Salwin House sits on property owned by the Mass Audubon Society. It's a special house that I'm going to talk about the reasons in a minute. But the basic evolution was there was a proposal that was presented to town meeting that the Salwin House essentially be moved, at least some of it, to Shaw Park and then expanded and turned into a facility for the Natick Historical Commission. That was a controversial proposal. It didn't make it through town meeting. But a lot of people at town meeting learned a lot about the Salwin House. We came back in the spring of 2017 with a proposal that the town meeting voted in its Article 28 for the fall annual town meeting. I would ask you, if you're really interested in the details, to look at that. But town meeting basically authorized and directed the Board of Selectmen to see if they will find a way, and they delineate almost all the legal ways that a select board can acquire property, to acquire the Salwin House. Following that meeting, the select board and the town moderator appointed a committee. I was on that committee. I'm currently chair of that committee, with the idea being to propose ways and methods that the town could acquire that house and work out a draft agreement between Mass Audubon and the town of Natick. So with that background, let me kind of take you through what has happened over the intervening years. A question that I get asked frequently is, well, gee, what's so special about the Salwin House? Because it's not a remarkable piece of architecture. It happens to be probably one of the oldest houses in New England. It's clearly one of the oldest houses in Natick. It was built in the 1690 era. It's questionable as to how much of what's there right now is original, but some of it is. But why is it important? It's not important as a house, in the same way that the Liberty Bell is not important as an iron bell. The Liberty Bell is important as a symbol of something that's vitally important to all of us, our freedoms. The Salwin House is a symbol of all of the values that I think most of us hold dear, particularly in a time where we have polarization everywhere we turn. And following the King Philip's War in the 1670s, which was one of the bloodiest conflicts ever to occur on North America, that was devastating both to the indigenous people as well as the colonials. One of the high points for Natick indigenous people during that war was the Deer Island Genocide, where all of the natives were exported to Deer Island without food, without shelter, without clothing. Half of them didn't make it through the winter. I mean, this was a horrific 2 or 3 year experience, and yet a few years later, and one can only imagine the degree of polarization that existed at that time in terms of how the colonials felt about the natives and how the natives felt about the colonials. I mean, it's hard to imagine the depth of feeling that people may have had. But in spite of that, 4 members of the Owasso family approached Thomas Sawin, who had a successful mill in Sherburne. And they had also approached the Massachusetts General Court to give them permission to offer Sawin a homestead of 55 acres if he would come to Natick and build a grist mill and a sawmill. And in exchange for the land and prime opportunity to get access to the Charles River, they were going to give him 55 acres, and what he had to do was agree to provide service to any Native Americans that needed it. They formed an agreement. I think the official date of the agreement was in the late 1680s. And what's one of the most fascinating things about that agreement is that I've been able to identify 369 agreements between the white folks on the continental United States and the Indians. 369 agreements. And the only one that I can find that was not ever aborted by one side or the other was the Sawin Agreement. The Native Americans lived up to that to the letter. So did the Sawin family. And to me, what that represents is a living example of people that had the courage, had the integrity, had the commitment, had the ability to trust, had the ability to forgive, had the ability to embrace values that they all cared about in order to do something that was good for everybody. Now, once that happened, what happened as a result of the sawmill? Well, when you drive around now, you look at all these trees. There were more trees then. In fact, one of the most significant products of the American colonies for a long time was timber. One of the largest customers were the European navies who had deforested themselves. And a sawmill was required in order to turn trees into lumber that could be worked. The Sawin Mill was really the first major industrial manufacturing facility in the colonies. It was the first public utility in the United States. It really accelerated the industrial development of the whole corridor between here and Boston. It precipitated the formation of mills all over where people could get water. Actually, as steam engines came into use, just about every small community had a steam-powered sawmill for all of the same reasons. You could take all of that timber and turn it into a product that could be sold, that people could build houses from. My conviction is that the Sawin House symbolizes people that took a massive risk to protect values that I think all of us hold pretty dear. We had an example of that earlier tonight when Chief Higgs introduced these two officers. That should give all of us a new sense of what it means when we see on the door, protect and serve. Those are the kind of people that are doing that. Those are the kind of values that are represented by the Solon House. So we were able to convince enough people that that was an important idea. Town meeting said, go do it. Town meeting appropriated actually over two warrant articles, about $30,000 for the committee to spend, about half of it which has been spent so far for surveys. The first challenge that the committee had was to come up with a way to implement acquiring and renovating that house that wasn't going to provide a financial risk, either near-term or long-term, to Natick. And our estimates at the time haven't changed a whole lot, somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $500,000, maybe a little bit more would be required. I did a lot of research to figure out how did other people solve this problem. And it turns out that there's a solution that has been fairly widely implemented. And basically, property like the Solon House is turned over to a governmental entity that turns around and contracts with a nonprofit organization to manage that property. The nonprofit raises the funds, mostly through donations, to do that. We put together a basic proposal and a documentation that was reviewed with town council, reviewed with the Board of Selectmen in executive session, that basically outlined a mechanism for doing that. Essentially, we would try and come to agreement with Mass Audubon with a way to transfer this property to Natick, that Natick would be responsible for it, but would delegate that responsibility to a third party. The third party would basically go out and raise money, both from federal sources because of the nature of this thing as a historical vehicle, and from private donations. We undertook, and that strategy, by the way, was presented to town meeting in the spring of 2018. That was a strategy that we pursued we're still pursuing it in terms of dynamic, interactive negotiations with Mass Audubon, which weren't all that productive for a long time. And I'm not going to go into any of the reasons why right now because they're immaterial. Basically, we believe that because of some personnel changes and some of the feedback that we've received, that this might be a good time to re-energize this conversation. So what I wanted to take the opportunity tonight was to share with you that unless you raise your hands and say, hey, not so fast, Henry, I think you guys ought to go find some other way to entertain yourself. We don't want you to do this. But unless you tell us to stop, what we will do is work with Mr. Erickson and Mr. Evans to create some documentation that will go to the president of Mass Audubon, set up a series of meetings, and it's my objective to have essentially an agreement in draft form that we can present to this board, and with your approval to town meeting by October, and then get on with making the Solon House a living monument to values that I think are critical for us. Now, I will also say that an important part of what the plan is, Dr. Nolan was very enthusiastic about helping us with this and got the high school engaged because the high school has a superb video arts department. And the Natick High School will work with us to put together a series of historical videos describing what happened in Natick from the early 1600s on, and describing specifically what the space of the Solon House is. So that's where it is right now, folks. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions. If you decide that you want us to go do something else, please let me know now, because I've got a lot of other ways to get in trouble, but I really am passionate about trying to make this happen. I think it's important. I think it's relevant to all of us, particularly in the community that we all see around us in terms of how people are interacting and the polarization and so forth. I just can't imagine the kind of courage it took Samhain and the Owasso to do what they did. And I, 300 years later, still applaud them. So that kind of concludes my remarks. Those of you who know me know that if somebody doesn't say, "Shut up, Henry," I can stand up here all night. But, Mr. Chairman, that's what my prepared comments are.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoagland. Questions from the board?
I have some questions.
Ms. Coughlin?
So, forgive me, this is all new to me, although I've read all of the documentation that was available on the Samhain House. But so since 2018, what has precluded fundraising to take place or the incorporation of a nonprofit?
Well, I think that basically I had a number of preliminary discussions with various people, and it was pretty clear that we weren't going to generate much interest of somebody really getting their checkbook out until we had a deal done with Mass Audubon. There's also a number of other federal sources that we can access and other sources. Anybody that's ever been involved in trying to raise a significant amount of money knows this is not trivial. It's not easy. I've done it before. I understand that it's bloody hard work. But I believe that this is a really valuable thing for us to do. I think that if we do it right, kids 200 years from now will know what the Samhain House is and why it was important. And that's why I'm concerned about this.
So for those who don't know, I'm trained as an historian, and I have degrees in history, and I've written books in history and articles, so I am fascinated with the idea of proceeding with this. I'm trying to wrap my head around the egg and chicken issue. So in order to get federal and big grants, not the $25 checks that we're all going to run out, to do that, you need a 501c3. And it sounds to me that Mass Audubon isn't going to be, it sounds to me, I could be wrong, correct me please, that they're not going to be interested unless they're working with a 501c3. And I'm kind of wondering, is it a chicken and egg thing?
The structure that has been envisioned is that Natick has a period of 4 years to be able to put together an arrangement where we get the funding generated. And if at the end of 4 years, if the 501c3 has failed, Natick can give it back to the Mass Audubon, and Mass Audubon can go ahead and essentially demolish it. The structure that the agreement has evolved to, I think, and everybody that's been through it in detail, and it's, contracts are painful. As we all know, protects Natick's interests. And the key thing that we've tried to do is make sure that we can provide value to a potential contributor and a potential investor. Now, I'm not going to turn away people that want to send me their $25 checks.
Of course not.
But the way I'm going to go after it is to go to corporations and ask them for $500,000 a crack, and then settle for $100,000. And that's much easier. And that I've done before. I know how to do that.
Right, that's a lot easier than raising the money through small contributions. That and federal grants, state grants, historical society grants, mass cultural grants. But there's still not a 50c3 organized yet. Is that correct?
I'm not hearing you very well.
I'm sorry. There's still not a 501c3, in other words, a legal nonprofit established yet. Is that correct?
No, and it will not be established until we have agreement on a contract. I mean, we have we have two attorneys involved with the project. One of them, Bill Proya, who some of you know. The other one, Moira Balsam, who's not as active as she was. But we can have a 501c3 created literally in 24 hours.
Yeah, I've created them. They're not, the paper's not the difficult part. But what I'm wondering is, you're saying that you're not going to do that until you have an agreement with Mass Audubon, but Mass Audubon's agreement is going to be with the town, is that correct?
There are two agreements required.
Okay.
Mass Audubon has to create an agreement with Natick. Then Natick has to create an agreement with a third-party 501c3. So the third-party 501c3 will be created as soon as the Mass Audubon Natick agreement is done. Then Natick is going to have to go through the typical purchasing process. I mean, there may be other people decide that they want to put together a 501c3 and support this project, and that's just fine. As long as there are competent, passionate people trying to make this happen, I think it'll happen.
And then my last question is, has there been any coordination with the Samhain Museum in Dover or the Sherburne Historical Association that has records on the Samhain property?
We have a member of the Samhain family who's part of our team. George, are you still here? And we actually have the original copy of the original deed between the Owassumugs and the Samhains. I haven't personally done that level of conversation, but we're interested in working with anybody that can help us figure out how to make this happen quicker.
It sounds like an exciting project. I'd be interested in hearing more about what the Mass Audubon and also Town Council's concern for the town of Natick with reference to liability or being on the hook for property or contractual obligations with Mass Audubon without this third part that you've discussed.
Well, I think everybody that thinks about it brings up some of those issues. I think the draft contract that we've evolved to, at least everybody that's looked at it, including town council for 3 or 4 times over the years, seems to think those things are covered.
Okay.
Prior conversations with our insurance carrier indicates that they have no problem, just treating that as part of Natick's liability insurance. Now, the 501c3 is going to have to carry as part of their expenses separate insurance. I mean, it'd be foolish not to. But the actual costs of implementing the transaction, really there are 2 things. We would have to agree to run a new water line for them, which would be about $6,000 to $10,000, and to pay for the change in the utility service for the electrical service. So there's probably enough money left in the budget to do that.
And we're talking about owning the property, not leasing it from Mass Audubon?
No, Natick would own it, just that little chunk of property.
Just the building.
Now, the sycamore trees on either side of it would continue to be owned by Mass Audubon. Now, those are 2 of the most oldest, largest trees in the Commonwealth, and the contract requires that they have to take care of them.
I just want to clarify
Yes.
one thing, which is ownership of the property is sort of a loose term. It's really ownership of the building, but as far as maintenance and upkeep, that would be the 501c3. The town would have nothing to do with that. It would be, the town would more or less have a pass-through agreement to that 501c3, be out of the business of managing that property. That would all fall on the 501c3, right? So that's sort of the structure. Mass Audubon, from what I understand, is unwilling to deal directly with the 501c3.
Of course, right, that makes sense.
So we have to do some sort of pass-through that does, achieves that one-way flow, and if for some reason the 501c3 goes away, then the town has to then be absolved from that agreement, and it would revert back to Mass Audubon to do with as they will.
Correct.
Mr. Sidney.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the gating factor here is actually having the town complete the negotiations with the Audubon and then funding the purchase of the building. That's right? That's the gate. That's the gating issue right now.
That's correct, but the funding issue is like under $15,000, which was appropriated in previously by town meeting.
I'm sorry, you said the funding issue is 15, so Audubon is looking for only $15,000?
They're not going to sell us the property. What we're telling them that we need to have them do is transfer it to us.
So there's a potential funding if they decide they want to sell it instead of just give it to us.
Why would they give it to us?
Why would they give it to us?
Yes.
Several reasons. One, it's going to turn out to be a PR debacle for them. As particularly now, given all of the people that are involved in online activities, the vast majority of the Audubon contributors are not aware of what the Samhain House represents and the degree to which we can't preserve this without some cooperation from the Samhain House. And also the house itself sits on land that's immediately adjacent to a good-sized maintenance facility that they built a few years ago. So it's not like they're giving up bare land. The probability is that if we can get this deal assembled and get the financing that we think we can arrange, we probably will end up reducing the size of the Samhain House to be more like it was back in the day, as opposed to how it's evolved. I mean, the issue is, as I said, is that this house needs to be a living, breathing example, a testimony to values that I think are really important to all of us. I think they're why we're all here. And so far, I haven't run into any reasons that this can't be done. As long as we have the right kind of legal support for the contracts so that we don't do something stupid contractually, I think we can eliminate Natick risk. I think we can make this happen. It just requires continued effort, continued commitment. I mean, it's like, I don't think any of you have ever done anything that was hard to do that didn't take a while and take some effort. This has been a little harder and it's taken a little longer than I ever thought, but we're not giving up.
So if I may, to continue. So really what we need here, I think this just, between COVID and administrative changes and so forth, I think this just went idle. We just need to make sure that it's something we're actually working on as, you know, as an administration to get the whatever deal right, just to raise the priority enough so that it actually gets done, as opposed to sits, you know, waiting for some pressure. Does that sound right? I mean, we've done most of the work. We've got this, and it sounds like we've got a potential contract. It sounds like there have been some changes over at the Audubon, so they might actually agree to do this. And it sounds like we've got appropriations to put in the various utilities that are required, and unless Audubon wants money, it sounds like it could be negotiated. Whether the negotiations succeed or not is a whole separate question. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'd like to call on the town administrator. I'm sorry, Bruce. Mr.
Let me just
Go ahead.
comment on that. There has been a lot of work, and Mr. Erickson just forwarded some of that work that had been done by James Fries when he was here. And so there is work that can be revived. We're not starting from square one. But the issue is and will continue to be the town cannot assume any liability to this. It has to be a straight pass-through. The town can also not expend any additional money other than what's already been allocated. I frankly don't think, and I haven't never talked to Audubon about this, so I can't verify that, but my supposition is this is an albatross for them, and they don't want to be managing this property. They don't want it lingering around. So if they get an agreement with the town that's they're amenable to, then the 501c3 can come along and everything moves along, right? But until we do need to revive that conversation. If the board wants to back this, then that conversation is something that can be set up reasonably quickly.
That's what I was. That's what I was kind of asking. That's what it sounded like. Really, it was just let's revive the conversation and pick it up again, so.
Okay.
Yeah, do we need a motion, or is it?
We do.
So I would be reluctant to vote on a motion. I don't have enough information. I just received information this afternoon.
Right.
I did a deep dive on what I had. I understand there are a lot of representations being made. I'd like to hear from the town administrator. It's been my experience that organizations like Audubon, they don't give away land or give away anything unless it fits very narrowly in their, what's the word I'm looking for? Their charter, their mission, their vision, whatever it is they define. And when I think about this, and it's important, so I'm not at all, I mean, sounds like an extremely important opportunity to preserve something for future generations. Having said that, I anticipate we're going to want to bring school children there. That means parking lots. That means having access roads. That means bathrooms. That means things that Audubon may not be happy with.
Well, I think actually the intent is that if we have kids there, it would be small groups. What we're going to do is, as I indicated, is basically use video tools, online tools, to help kids understand what it is. The house is not going to be very big when it's finished. The stairways, for example, are suicidal. And
not to code.
The most interesting part of the house, actually, in terms of the construction, is the basement. But how that was put together. But I think that this can be positioned as a positive thing for Mass Audubon, and a positive way for Mass Audubon to really support helping Natick protect Natick's heritage. They're helping protect Natick's wildlife and birds and so forth. This helps protect Natick's heritage. And I think that that can be spun as a very positive thing. Similarly, if they decide not to, the contrary argument can be made as well.
Can we buy the house and move it? You said there was a basement. I know that historic houses are moved all the time. Is that something we can do? I saw one of the recommendations, there was I'm sorry, was there somebody in the back that needed to speak up?
At some point, if possible.
It's not.
I'm sorry, Mr. Golden, I was just asking a question. This was put on the agenda for tonight's meeting, and I received materials later this afternoon, so I'm trying to become familiar.
I'm pleased to come into the board and the speaker would allow.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Golden,
hear,
you can
I
speak.
didn't hear the question.
Mr. Golden wants to speak.
All right, Mr. Golden, if you have an answer or a statement, please come to the podium. You had said that you wanted to earlier, so please come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So if I could just leave my question with whoever might want to answer it. Has that been explored as a possibility? Preserving the house and moving it onto public land that we own already?
Yes, that concept has been discussed. It's fairly well understood. The problem would be where.
Okay.
Right.
And that would obviously be
Logistic.
probably more expensive than renovating it in spite. But if we have a good plan to do that, we have a place to put it, then raising the money to do it just means we got to raise more money.
Okay, understood. You all set?
Yeah, I'm well done, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Goldman, please reintroduce yourself. It was a
Thank you,
while ago.
Mr. Chairman. My name again is Peter Golden. I am a resident of the town, and I've had a long interest in the history of the community and the Soren House in particular, especially since through a entirely unanticipated and fortuitous meeting, I met a direct descendant of Thomas himself, who sits here tonight representing the family of Thomas Soren. I did not bring a bucket of whitewash with me tonight, but it would be very appropriate if I had. It's notable that John James Audubon may in fact be of Carib African descent himself, was a slave owner, and is the stepson of African American slaves, and all of his siblings were black.
Just interject here. What has this got to do with the scope of what we're talking about?
Everything.
Sowen House. No,
Because
this is historical
the house was-
context, and we don't need a history lesson.
Everything, because the house was vacated by direct members of the family in 1837, who were shunned out of the community for advocating abolition.
Okay.
The house itself is a teachable moment of extraordinary breadth and depth, and while its origins in the King Philip War epic are central to this discussion, the reality is that Natick was a slave community, and this needs to be recognized and needs to be integrated into the narrative. And the house needs to be preserved because it is one of the most significant structures on the North American continent with regard to the whole issue of extinction of Native Americans and African Americans. So this community has carefully avoided dealing with that issue for decades, if not centuries. And there's a whole subtext of history here in the 1830s that involves Henry Wilson, Lydia Maria Child, and on and on and on, including Emerson and Thoreau and many others. So I stand here utterly astonished that at this stage of the game we're still debating the issue, and Audubon has managed to avoid dealing with the issue of Audubon's origins, who, by the way, was a native of the island of Haiti and escaped that revolution, and on and on and on. I will not get granular here. I'll simply make a point. This house sits within the boundaries of a bird sanctuary, of an animal sanctuary. It needs to be recognized as such. It cannot be turned into a heavily accessed, heavily visited space. Audubon needs to be respected here and carefully, or should I say the animals that inhabit that 620 acres. However this plays out, the conciliation needs to be done in a very delicate and nuanced way so that Audubon understands it can begin to deal with its heritage of slavery, and so that the town can begin to recognize that its history is a slave plantation town. The Farris House, of course, which was demolished in 2015 in an act of utter
I'm going to stop you right here, because I think we've got the gist of what you're saying,
To the point, enough lecturing. At some point, that lecturing needs to occur, and it needs to occur around the Sarn House in a straightforward way. To move the house into Shaw Park, by the way, which was previously discussed by the Historical Society, would be to redesecrate a Native American burial ground and would be entirely inappropriate. Thank you very much for your patience.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of clarification.
Sure.
My series of questions, to be clear, is not debate or denying the importance or even questioning whether this is important enough for the board to take up a half hour of time. My questions are based because I do not have knowledge. This is a whole new board. From 2018, these are 5 new people who are trying to go back and look into to 2013, when this was first raised, and get a very good understanding of what has been done in the past. So that's all my question. My questions aren't debate. They're not saying that this isn't important. It's not denying the slave and the historical atrocities. These are all very important things, but the questions I'm asking are very granular and specific so that we can make informed decisions. And at this point in time, I have not had enough time to go through all this. I'm happy to set aside and ask the chair if he'll put it on an agenda in 2 weeks for us to discuss it. I'd also like our town administrator to talk to the Audubon Society and see where they are on this. But I just want to be clear. There's no reticence on my part. I just ask a lot of questions. And if you've been in this room with me before, you know that's what I do. I just ask questions because I don't know. Thank you.
Usually good questions.
Well,
Always good.
and I want to, reiterate that those questions are important because a big part of that is, the newness of this for several of us. And, after listening to you, Mr. Hoagland, Mr. Golden, I appreciate you sharing. I think that based on what you shared, we should want to do our research. We should want to know why this is so important and not treat it cavalier or or treat it lightly. We should want to know why this is so important to the history of Natick and make an informed decision. So I think that I just want to, reiterate the importance of us understanding the history seriously. Based on what you said, so we can make an informed decision about this. But thank you for sharing what you've shared.
Can I ask I'm sorry, Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to say I do have some historical perspective as a select board member, and formerly when the discussion happened around Shaw Park, I was passively involved. I wasn't directly involved in the meetings, but did meet with a lot of members, several that are here tonight, as well as Chief Carringhands about this issue and its impact on the Native communities that have connections to the community. I don't want to get into further discussion. I think this board is moving in the right direction. We need to learn more. I think there's general agreement here that this is important and valuable and something worth pursuing. I also respect the fact that those that have been involved with it have been involved with it in almost 2 decades now, I think is when the first date came about. Mr. Solon, if I remember you mentioning 2006, is that the first starting point? So this has been going on. While it's new to us, it's not new to those that care deeply about this, and I think for the community at large, we've got a tremendous teachable moment and opportunity to act. I just want for the board's benefit and for the community's benefit to also not be lost on us that we just heard about a $290,000 grant to look at a design of a park on the Charles River. And when we decided to remove the spillway and potentially reconstruct the area of the Charles River Dam into something meaningful for the community, we're going to be looking at this entire part of town in a large way. I think the Solon House and its history and the greater narrative that has been brought up tonight is part of that discussion. How we acknowledge, how we do things, whether we move them or not, I think are really important. And I'm glad that we've got so many different members of the community that care about this issue from different perspectives. But I think there is this convergence and this tremendous opportunity in this moment to do right by our history, to take ownership of that, and to take custodianship of what we do with it moving forward. So thank you to those that brought it up. And I do encourage the board, as my colleagues have already said, to continue to pursue this.
Okay. In that vein, one of the requests has been to continue this to another date. So there are two choices in September at this moment in time. One is September 6th and the other September 20th. To me, it seems like September 20th should be the target because that hopefully will give us time to absorb the material, number one, and time for the town administrator and I to have a conversation about this and figure out what next steps we're willing to take. If I'm reading the room correctly, and tell me if I'm wrong, people want to move ahead with this on the board, right? But with the proviso that we need to step cautiously until we have more information. So if we can get back in, say, a week's time, Mr. Erickson and I can schedule a meeting with Mass Audubon and talk through issues. We can schedule time with council to talk about the previous 501c3 agreement and the town agreements and resurrect whatever state they're in. And again, we don't know, is it close? Is it bigger than a bread box? What is it? So we don't know the answer. But I think if we put this on the agenda for the 20th, we should have some meaningful progress by then. Does everybody agree to that? Yes.
That would also give Mr. Sidney an opportunity to be here for deliberations.
That's another good point. Okay. So let us do
which
that.
I would appreciate.
Let us postpone a vote until...
You got somebody who wants to speak.
I'm sorry. Mr. Evers, certainly, please. Sorry, I didn't see your hand. I was writing.
Behind the podium. Steve Evers, 17 Morgan Drive, and I'm chair of the Historical Commission for almost 50 years. The enabling work that we've done is that we've thoroughly inventoried, we hired a preservation planner, thoroughly inventoried the property, the history about the family, everything that's needed to be known about the site as well as the existing house. And that has made it National Register eligible. And if we make that determination with Mass Historical Commission, we are then eligible for 50% matching preservation grants, which is an enabling way to help this project. The second thing is, as you know, we passed the CPA. In a number of years, that's going to accumulate enough funds, and this is going to be quite qualifiable for stabilization and other restoration. Other thing that we did do is I walked through with a insurance adjuster that deals with historic properties, and that $250,000 to $500,000 is really its stabilization cost. But that's the most important thing to do because otherwise it could collapse. It's not going to stay together forever. But I just wanted you to know the Historical Commission has been very active supporting this whole venture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evers. Okay. So sounds like we've moved this to the 20th to make a decision, and behind the scenes, or in between the meetings, and Mr. Erickson and I will talk to Ms. North. We'll talk and probably have a conversation with Mr. Hoagland, and we'll get a better sense of where we're at by the 20th. Everybody good with that? Let's move on to the specialized stretch code.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I just had a text from Chief Hicks.
Yes.
We need to amend the motion that we made to approve the promotions to include the effective date of September 6th.
Oh, September 6th or 7th?
September 6th.
Okay. All right.
So,
let me go back to way to the beginning.
Yeah, so that was,
That was,
so that should, yeah, I moved and Mr. Joseph seconded to approve the appointments, and we just need to make sure that the,
does everybody approve that amendment?
Make a host.
All it is dating it September 7th?
September 6th.
I'm sorry, September 6th as the start date. Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then we should vote that again.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right, voted, good. Okay. Ms. Wilson Martin, a very patient Ms. Wilson Martin. Please proceed.
Thank you. Jillian Wilson-Martin, Sustainability Director for the Town of Natick. I'm just going to sign into your meeting so I could share some slides. I apologize I wasn't able to send them in advance. It doesn't change the content of what I wanted to talk to you about, but I thought it would be easier to summarize some of the kind of dense code language that we shared as an attachment. So I'm just joining Zoom right now. Joining me is Joanne Bassetta. She's the director of the Green Communities Program. She's joining me virtually.
Welcome.
And it's just
Sorry we get delayed so long. You had to wait.
I'm okay with it. Just trying to get into the meeting. Second.
Is the presentation in the Novus?
No, can I just share the Google Slides with you? Because it's not letting me log into Zoom for some reason.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
No, thank you for doing it. Always good to correct it at the event.
What's that?
Always good to correct it at the event.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'll just say next slide. Thanks again for having me, and thanks for all of your time this evening. I know you guys have long agendas, and I'm going to try to keep this brief, but it is kind of a hefty conversation about code. So I wanted to make sure that we did it justice in terms of talking about it as extensively and answering your questions as much as possible. But first, if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to say thank you for your work as board members. I felt so appreciated at our Green Communities event that happened here in Natick. It was really meaningful to have all of you there for that. Joanne was at the event. She's the one with the green sign there, and it was just really nice to share that moment with you and celebrate Natick's participation in the program. And with that, maybe I could let Joanne introduce herself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. That's right. It seemed like so long ago, but it was just 10 weeks ago when we were under that solar canopy, under that hot day, recognizing the good work that Natick is doing, as well as other initiatives. I always like to kid Jillian that Natick is the OGGC, was part of one of the original groups of green communities when we rolled out the program in 2010. And I just want to reiterate what a great partnership we have with the town from the get-go. Very active participants in our grant program. I think Natick is in the $1 Million Club, having received awards from us for over $1 million. And your former town administrator was in our first group of Green Communities Advisory Council back when we started. So we've enjoyed a great partnership. And I also want to give a shout out for your success in getting the MVP grant that was just awarded earlier today. And I'm here to answer any questions that Jillian can't, but I'm sure she'll be able to answer the majority of them. So I'll be on mute for the time being.
Thanks, Joanne. So we're going to dive into information about energy codes in Massachusetts, but just one step removed and related to that is that it's really an exciting time in sustainability and living and working in Massachusetts, and with all of the funding that's available now at the state level from our utilities and then also substantially from the federal government. Natick has already been lucky to to be able to receive funding from some of these programs through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We were able to receive a $2 million grant for Benham Elementary to do some really much needed upgrades around clean energy and providing cooling to that school, which hasn't existed in the building since it was built. That law alone provides literally billions of dollars for investments that have a deep tie to sustainability, and they're not all clean energy related. They really touch every department, from projects related to stormwater, to water quality, to river restoration and dam removal. NOAA has funding for to fund 100% of the cost of removing dams. So there's a lot of funding out there. And the Inflation Reduction Act is, we're celebrating the 1-year anniversary of that this month. And as part of that program, Natick and organizations that have never been eligible to receive tax credits because we don't pay taxes, we are now eligible to receive funding through those programs that will really dramatically change the equation that we have to use when making investments in clean energy and doing upgrades to our buildings. And the Mass Save program, we're in the second year of the new 3-year program that refreshes every 3 years. Those incentives have changed dramatically. We're expecting to receive about $300,000 in an incentive payment for our library project that is involving a heat pump. We're eligible to receive additional funding on top of the grant from the Department of Energy, the federal grant for Benham, and it's possible that we might even be eligible to apply for those tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act for that project. So there's just so much stacking of incentives, and it's exciting. And it's also, for me as a staff person and a party of one, it's kind of overwhelming. It's a bit of a champagne problem, but I want to flag this for you because I'm really thrilled about it, but my nature is to just always be trying to do more and to take advantage of every opportunity I can for Natick. And so I feel like you should know that we're probably going to be leaving money on the table if we're not really investing in capacity to do more. So that's almost a separate conversation, but it just feels so important to bring up because of just this year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act.
Can I just pause for 10 seconds? Is that something sorry, thank you, that a contract resource could help with?
I think that is one way. I would love to make my party of one a party of two over time. Because when I started this position, it was very much tied to the Green Communities program, and I was applying every year for a $300,000 grant. And this year alone, I have assisted. I haven't been the only person working on these applications. It's a team effort, but a lot of my time has been spent working on these grant applications. It's been over a $3 million application round, more than that. And I think we've actually been batting 1,000 on all of them, which is incredible. Like, I don't expect that to happen every time, but there's also grants that I have to say, no, we can't work on that. We have to do the grant that we applied for. Right. So it's exciting and thrilling, but just a lot. But again, a champagne problem.
I'll just say that we're working on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to publicize.
Well, so the reason that I'm on your agenda is to talk about our net zero goal and an action that we have available to us to advance a priority that's listed in that goal. And as I know you're familiar with, we have a net zero goal, which is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to offset what we can't by investing in renewable energy here, producing renewable energy. And that was promulgated through a vote of town meeting in 2018. It was a non-binding resolution, but our goal is the same goal as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as the United States, federal government, and we've been working on that goal. And of course, Natick can't achieve that on its own, so it does involve a lot of partners. But where we started was understanding where our emissions come from, developing a net zero action plan, and working with the board to review that action plan. And that action plan actually was unanimously endorsed by every major elected board in Natick that really has a relevance to this plan, including the select board, the school committee, the planning board, and some other boards like the Conservation Commission, ones that start to be people who care but maybe aren't as directly related to actions on it. And when we were doing our inventory, we learned that the majority of our emissions, could you go to the next slide? Sorry. The majority of our emissions come from our buildings, and that includes not only our commercial buildings, but also our homes. And it's about half and half from homes and from commercial buildings. About 35% come from transportation, and less than 1% come from waste. And you can see here that buildings are very important when it comes to achieving our net zero goal, or even having like a chance of achieving it. And that's why we have, if you go to the next slide, a number of actions that are focused on how we can make our homes and our businesses, and our buildings super efficient and fossil fuel free. And we know that that's not something that's going to happen overnight. I really believe in this approach of zero over time, which is the approach that I am partnering with departments on, where I work really closely with our public works and facilities departments. And when there's a building that needs a major mechanical upgrade, we see that as a trigger point where we can make an investment and take advantage of funding opportunities to help make sure that it's to the town's benefit as much as possible, and we're not having to take that additional cost on where we can avoid it, to make an investment in the right solution, the solution that we know is designed for the future. Because what we've experienced are challenges where when a building isn't designed for the future from the start, it's really difficult to retrofit it. These are two different basements in Natick. If you go to the next slide. The first, the one on the left, is in the basement of the Morse Institute Library. And all of those pipes that have red lines on them, all of those had to be removed as part of our project. So it was a massive project, and it took a lot of studying, a lot of time. It took the utility a year to figure out what the incentive should even be, because they had such a hard time understanding how this project would work in their new program, and the extent of the work was really unusual. The second picture is another basement in Natick in a residential home. It's actually my home in Natick, and I moved recently in Natick, so this is my new basement. And I have a boiler, and I have a hot water baseboard system. And there's no real easy way for me to make this new home a net zero home. And of course, that's something I'm super passionate about. And so, to me, these challenges can be more easily solved by building new homes where we have an opportunity, another trigger point, if you will, to do something for the future instead of doing something in the ways of the past. If you could go to the next slide. So that's why we're interested in working on building code. It was one of our priorities in our action plan, which I kind of skipped over on slide 6. But if you go to the next slide, the 3 takeaways I want you to have about the next few slides, which are really a very high-level overview of the new energy code options as it relates to building and new construction in Natick, is these 3 things. That in 2023, this year, the energy code was updated, and it's a pretty massive change to what had been happening before. And now, instead of having 2 options, we have 3 options, which I'm going to go through. One of those new options is called the specialized code, and that is very similar to the stretch code, which is a code that Natick is currently a member of. We adopted that in order to become a green community. And there's really extensive training and incentives available for both of those codes and for really all of the energy codes. I would offer that those trainings are improving as the code officials become more familiar with the code. They were just released, so there's more training now than when it first was launched, and there's, I think, better training. I actually participated in a training today to learn about renovations under the new codes, and learned a lot, and there was really great questions from builders. And the last thing is that adopting the specialized code is really critical to achieving our net zero goals. We can't keep building homes that use fossil fuels, as easy as it is, we have to start doing things differently. And because if we do that, we're essentially locking those homeowners into creating more emissions for the lifespan of that equipment. And just like how I get kind of panicked when I hear that, there's a capital project to replace a boiler that I didn't know about, I get nervous because it means, that boiler is going to be here for another 30 years. And I am going to miss an opportunity to stop that project and pivot to something else. And what I want to do is help Natick residents pivot to what we know they need for the future and to avoid costs that they don't need to spend in the future to make their homes relevant in that climate. So, as background, the two energy code options that existed before 2023 were the base code and the stretch code. And at one point it was just the base code. But for a long time now, we've been living with the base and the stretch code. The majority of Massachusetts follows the stretch code. And the base code is built off of an international code called the International Energy Conservation Code. And that is a default code in Massachusetts for a municipality if the municipality doesn't take any action, if they don't opt into a more aggressive code. The stretch code is kind of like the better. So you have the base code is good, the stretch code is better, and that is more focused on energy efficiency and really has an emphasis on energy performance. And that has been measured to date based on HERS ratings, which are home energy, I think it's home energy rating system, I think is what it is. That's the system that they use for rating. And over the years, and the stretch code required this, there was lower HERS ratings that homes had to achieve. And a lower HERS rating meant that your home was more efficient. And that was a big leap when we adopted the stretch code in 2010, but it's a leap that by all intents and purposes hasn't really impacted the amount of development in Natick. And we continue to be a stretch code community. In 2021, the next slide, Governor Baker signed the Next Generation Roadmap for Climate Policy, and there was a number of measures in this, but one of them was to have a net zero code be created as an opportunity for municipalities to opt in, because municipalities can't do anything more than what the state provides code options for. We don't have the authority. And so we were limited to do anything beyond the stretch code, even if we wanted to, and some communities tried to, and they were told they weren't allowed to. And this is a means to allow for communities to do more, because over time as well, the stretch code became what we were saying as it became less stretchy. It wasn't really working towards our goals. It was out of sync with Massachusetts and our local goals around emission reductions. So if you go to the next slide, we now have, this slide. We now have three codes, the base, the stretch, and the specialized. The base and the stretch were updated significantly as part of the new rollout of the codes. And the specialized code is much more consistent with Natick and Massachusetts greenhouse gas reduction goals. Similar to the stretch code, it requires municipalities to opt in through a vote by town meeting. There's green communities, they're not ready to announce anything yet, but last summer they had requested feedback and provided essentially a straw proposal for a Green Communities 2.0 program that would likely require municipalities to opt in to this new code to be eligible for greater funding opportunities. And since the code became available in this year, 18 communities have already opted in, and we know that a number of our neighbors are planning on opting in. Wellesley and Sherburne have already opted in, but we also know that Wayland is planning on opting in, Weston is opting in, and there's a number of other communities that either have it on their fall town meeting agenda or their spring town meeting agenda. Some communities aren't as lucky to have town meeting twice a year, so. So the key things to know about the updates to the stretch code that have changed are summarized here. I we'll just share them briefly. Something that I think is really exciting is I had mentioned there's the HERS rating system, and that has always been used through the stretch code in the past to evaluate how if a home is compliant with the stretch code. But there's a new pathway to measure compliance, which is through passive house certification. And passive house certification is actually used a lot by affordable housing organizations. And actually, the Auburn Street developer or nonprofit, they use that in the majority of their affordable housing projects, and they're planning on using that in Natick. I've talked to them about that, and they're really excited about it. It also has stronger energy efficiency requirements. So right now, the HERS rating, if you just use that easy number as an example, it's I think it's 51 right now, and it's dropping to 42 next year when the code, or it's dropping into the 40s when the code goes into full effect. And there's and I say into the 40s because depending on the type of home you're building, slightly different number in the 40s. And then there's a few other requirements that are part of the update to the stretch code, which is what Natick is already requiring of new construction right now because we are a stretch code community. The interesting thing about the specialized code and the stretch code is that they actually aren't very different, which was kind of surprising to me with the rollout, because most of the updates and a lot of the benefits are actually going to be absorbed by a lot of communities in Massachusetts because they're already stretch code communities. But the one thing that the specialized code does that the stretch code doesn't is that if you are going to install, if you're planning on heating your home with fossil fuels or having a gas stove or hot water heater, you're 100% allowed to have that. There's no banning of any fossil fuel through the specialized code, but you are required to wire your home for future electrification. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a really important thing because it makes it easier for homeowners or businesses or even our buildings. I think about the Kennedy Middle School, that will be a difficult building to retrofit. And if we look at the buildings that are on the horizon, the school committee has signaled they're interested in rebuilding or renovating Memorial Elementary School. This is something that I would have brought as a request to the board as a policy for our community anyway, but the special ed code requires that. Even if you are choosing to use fossil fuels in your new building, you're required to be ready for the future. It also has requirements for homes that are larger than 4,000 square feet that are using fossil fuels, or they say mixed fuels, to have solar on site. And they also are requiring passive house for multifamilies. So it's not, the HERS rating system isn't available to multifamily projects. And then this next slide, this is kind of a more geeky way of looking at the code, but this is provided through the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships. It's a table that compares the stretch code to the specialized code. They're using different colors than I did, but so their bluish color is the stretch code, and then they call it the municipal opt-in stretch code, which is another way of saying the specialized code. And I circled the two kind of areas that are really different between this stretch code and the specialized code, which is again related to homes that are greater than 4,000 square feet, and also the passive house certification for multifamilies. And then it wasn't easy to see in the table, but the pre-wiring is the major difference. You can skip the Auburn Street picture. And the incentives. So, just as I was saying in the beginning of the presentation, that there's so much funding for doing the right thing right now when it comes to sustainability. That's also true for builders, and there's and homeowners. And so Mass Save, for an all-electric home, they have incentives that are rebates of $15,000 to $25,000, depending on how deep you go in terms of energy efficiency in combination with electrification. There's funding for multifamily passive house as part of the new construction program. I've already spoken with the Auburn Street team about we're planning on doing a design charrette with Eversource because they support passive house certification and can help multifamily and especially affordable housing do studies and plan their projects. There's also tons of free training and technical support. During the training I was on today, it was a webinar, and people were sending questions in, and the trainer was talking about a hotline that they have that you can call, and also was committing to answering every question that came in, even though some were like clearly very specific to a project that a builder was working on and not a general, educational credit type question. And then there's also all of these tax credits that are now available, and this is again stacking on top of what people can receive through the Mass Save program, and there's the 30% tax credit for the installation and equipment costs of not just rooftop solar, but also ground source heat pumps, which are geothermal, and then there's additional tax credit for energy efficiency in new construction. So the next slide is where do we go from here? And, I wasn't here when we became a green community, and I haven't necessarily, I feel like we've been leading the way on a lot of projects in Natick, but when it comes to policy and adopting new bylaws, I don't know if I have really felt like that Natick is a leader in sustainability, and I would like to see us be a leader, and I would also like to see us be able to be part of a new Green Communities 2.0 program and be a founding member of that program. Here is a map that shows which communities have already adopted the specialized code, and I mentioned there's a number more that are coming, and I hope that we could see Natick on that map in the near future. It's not something that's on the agenda or on the warrant for a fall town meeting, but I would like to work with the board and I'd like to understand if you are interested in partnering and potentially sponsoring an article for Springtown meeting. And I wouldn't ask you to do that if you go to the next slide without a large amount of public outreach. I think that's really important. I maybe saw that to my detriment in some of the DAM meetings of the amount of public outreach that happened, but I do really value it. And as part of that, I've really been watching those other communities who've done a lot of outreach and had some really impressive speakers and meetings and just different tools of outreach. And so these are some ideas that I've gotten from them, but it's not limited to this or exclusive to this. And I could see us, having a public forum and doing outreach to builders. I've worked with the building or the Community and Economic Development Department to get information on the builders who are doing a lot of building in Natick. I truly think it's really, it would be a change for builders, but it's really an opportunity for them to access new incentives and trainings and programs. And my understanding is that with those, the cost really becomes less of a factor if they're able to participate in those programs. So with that was all I had, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and you don't have to answer tonight about if we want to work together on this, but I would really love to, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson-Morton. Mr. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just one clarification. One of the slides indicated that there would be a sort of requirement of pre-wiring for all electric and having some mixed energy sources. Yeah, I think you just passed it. You mentioned it had to be solar. Is that, that just seems, depending on the location of a property, that seems very narrow. Did I hear that right, or is that just a...
I'm going to let Joanne answer that, but I believe that's really related to the new homes that are over 4,000 square feet.
Right.
And what I will say is that with a lot of new construction, I do see opportunities for solar that end up being missed because of the way the home is designed.
Right.
But I'll let Joanne answer.
Sure. So you guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So solar is required for new homes regardless of size that are mixed use, mixed fuel, I should say. For smaller dwelling units or smaller homes under 4,000 square feet, 4 kilowatts of solar is required to be put on. for the larger homes, enough solar has to be available on site to negate the greenhouse gas emissions from the fossil fuels. So it kind of nets zero in a sort of virtual way. There are provisions for sites that are shaded. Obviously, if there's houses being built in the middle of the woods, don't condone clear cutting for the sake of solar. So there's provisions, if you go into the weeds of the code, how it's determined what is, too shady for solar.
Thank you, and that's kind of where I was going with this, given obviously a lot of attention to tree removal in this community, that if you're mandating solar and you're not in the appropriate site, that was exactly my concern. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you addressing that. And for what it's worth, I'm a supporter, so I look forward to bringing that back.
Yeah, let me just follow up. One of the things at the solar event that was noticeable was the map they had of the entire state, and I'm going to screw up the terms, but it basically said these are solar capable, these are solar optimized, and these are sort of spots that are unlikely to support solar, and they could get solar from these other locations. So that to me was pretty amazing, because it showed most of the state being capable of going far further with solar than you would think possible. So,
if I may, just selfishly, I've participated in 2 Boston Solar installations in my 2 homes over the last 5 years in Natick, so I'm grateful for the program, and I think the community is very well served by it. Thank you.
Ditto for the heat pump, all electric. I think, there's always the reservation, moving forward too quickly, but I would love to have seen the 15,000 rebate instead of the 10,000 one I got, but that's life. And I've had nothing but good things to say about the heat pump that was installed. We went all electric. The unfortunate thing was that we had to replace a water heater before we did that. We had to do that before we went all electric, and couldn't do that next time. So I think one of the things I'd like to mention is I met with Jillian and the Sustainability Committee earlier this year to talk about this and understand the specialized stretch code. And we talked about what it would take to get to town meeting to get support of that. We didn't want to be on the bleeding edge of that. We wanted to work with the builders to get them to understand what was involved, overcome, I won't call them objections, I'll call them reservations. Get them through that knot-hole. And it sounds like a lot of that training is starting to happen. And so we're building momentum. So while we're not committing to an article tonight, I think reading the tea leaves on the board here, I think we're all pretty supportive of it in concept. So let's work together to do this. Given the hour, I know you don't want to be here 10 past 10. So we will continue to work together and move this forward. And I think the town is going to be really well served by moving ahead with this. So,
Thank you, Jillian. And I appreciate your approach, the community approach to, this. Yes, I appreciate this a lot. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Questions?
I don't really have a question, just a comment. I had reached out to you for a list of, I had reached out to you for a list of communities that had adopted. And so we have 18 communities in Massachusetts that have adopted, and we have about maybe 4 or 5 that are looking to adopt in the fall or in the spring. My only concern, and it's not something that undermines my support at all, is being able to speak to town meeting about the impact on new growth. And because all of these are towns that have adopted it, the earliest was July of last year, there's, other than the town of Cambridge, or city of Cambridge, there's no numbers on new growth and whether that's had an impact. I spoke with Senator Spilka's office and Dave Linsky's office, and he said that they've received 50% for and 50% against. So one thing that I'd like to be able to present, and I'm gathering data as I get it, and I'll send it to you, to a town meeting, is that this is what, if you're having fears about impact on new growth, this is what we're seeing in other communities, whether they're cities, towns, open town meeting, representative town meeting, et cetera. I just want to share that.
That's great data, and that'll be terrific.
Because that, I think, is going to be the single most loudly voiced issue is, how will this affect building? And I'd like us to be able to tell builders that in these other communities, I mean, what little data I have, there's no significant impact on new growth, industrial or commercial or residential. Thank you so much for all you do and for the great grants.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm definitely supportive. And I think Mr. Evans has probably read the tea leaves right. I wish my house qualified for a lot of this stuff. A 120-year-old house is very difficult to retrofit and make efficient. I'm also hoping that, and I know Mr. Erickson said we're working on it, but I'm hoping we find a way to get you help so we can not leave money on the table in the future. So I'm supportive of that too.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts? All right. Thank you very much, Jillian.
Mr. Chair, point of order. Just wanted to ask a question.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did somebody? Oh, thank you, Joanne. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joanne.
Good to see you again.
Thank you, Joanne.
Sure. Take care. Have a good night,
Hanging
everyone.
with us tonight. Thank you.
Oh, sure. Bye-bye.
I have a suggestion. All right.
Me
given
too.
that-
I think we're going to think right along the same lines.
Okay, good.
Go for it, Bruce.
Finally. All right, so I think I can do like a speed read of a couple of these. Number one, proposed collaboration on a working group. It would be 2 people nominated from our board to work with 3 on the Charter and Bylaws Review Committee. That will be to be formed. So that will be something that we can elaborate on in the future and cross off the agenda for tonight.
Okay.
Consider 2023 fall annual town meeting articles. We can punt that to the 6th.
Yep.
Refer the zoning amendments to the planning board. I think that can be just, does anybody have an issue?
I have a motion to move
Okay.
Articles 14 through 19, 20, and include 21 and 22. 22 is a
Yep.
citizen's petition, but it's a zoning article. Move to refer those zoning amendments to the planning board for review for fall annual town meeting. That's my motion.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Move to refer zoning amendments numbered 14 through 19, comma 20, 21, and 22 to the planning board for review for fall annual town meeting 2023.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Discussion?
Discuss, I'm
Sorry, can we add those with an amendment at this stage because they weren't posted?
Yeah, that's,
I know that certain things were posted publicly, but I don't know if that's as much of an issue.
it's on the warrant, and for us, it's talking about referring zoning amendments.
The agenda's
Right,
pretty
and
broad.
That's pretty general. I don't think we have to get to specificity.
The agenda is broad. How we posted it was what we provided for supporting documents.
I think
Yeah,
that-
I'm open to it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking at all these articles. You did not include 23, just want to make sure.
And 23.
So 20, well, I guess my question is, so one of the things that's technical is under Mass General Law 48, Section 5, we actually need to receive the actual proposed zoning.
Sure.
An article is different than proposed zoning. An article is really just to see if the town will do X.
Gotcha.
The proposed zoning is amend X to be Y. For all the ones that you reference, including
Oh, I did
just
not
something
want
that came in-
23. I did not want 23 on
Okay.
there.
Because we've received the article, but we haven't received the zoning.
22.
22.
Which was just for full disclosure, was just received. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think maybe we can do the referral tonight, and then we can always do a confirmation referral on next Wednesday.
Yeah,
14 to 19, 20, 21, and 22.
Yes, 23 is not part of my motion.
Everything else we have received in some fashion to referral.
Okay.
Everybody
So
good?
I did second.
Right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm abstaining as a citizen petitioner of
Yeah,
22.
Got it. 401.
401.
All right, so moving right along, we now have deliberation on a select board position of establishment of a charter commission. Mr. Joseph asked me to put this on the agenda so that he wouldn't have to do an announcement at every single meeting of ours until the actual vote comes up. So I will entertain a motion to support the creation, the establishment of a charter commission as recommended by the, not the Charter and Bylaw Review, Town Governance Study Committee. It's late, sorry.
So moved.
And moved by Mr. Joseph, seconded by, was that Ms.
I'm
Pope?
confused. This says deliberation.
Right. Deliberation on the select board position on the establishment. So what we're deliberating is whether we want to support or.
So we have to take the motion first and then have discussion, deliberation about it.
Right.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You can do both, but
We can do both simultaneously if you'd like, but
I was going to.
in the interest of time, we may want to do it.
I wanted to sort of
Yeah.
bring up the issue.
So who's
Okay,
the second?
so it was Catherine, right? Yeah. So that was moved by Paul, seconded by Catherine.
Yes, so now
Paul,
in discussion.
please.
So, yeah, consistent with, I think, what I've been bringing up as a private citizen, and it's certainly to your point about the Town Governance Study Committee, and knowing that the activity of the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee, although noble work, is focused on a specific scope within the existing form of government. And I think the spirit of what we heard from the Town Governance Study Committee was that the community really deserves an independent and I think more equitable and accessible group to study this issue and come back to the voters. So I think a charter commission basically enables the voters to decide who gets to decide a proposed form of government or changes to the form of government. And I think regardless of where you stand in terms of the select board's process in the past, the current process under the CBRC, in my opinion, there's nothing more important than giving this voice to the voters as a function of independence, accountability, and equity. Thank you.
Mr. Sidney. Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
So I'm going to walk a very fine line here. I think it's right for the citizens to request a charter commission, and I think that the citizens should. I don't think it's the place of the select board to either support it or not support it. I think the select board should be agnostic on this. And I support the formation of a charter commission, but I think the board has to do the board's work, and I think the board does its work best if it stays agnostic on the subject of a charter commission. And that's just my opinion. So I'm going to vote against support, only because I think the board should stay agnostic.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
if I may. Again, the board is acting as a board, and the board had appointed a committee to study this. So with due respect to my colleague here, we have a recommendation of a committee we appointed that spent
Year plus.
15 months, 38 meetings, and that's not including, I think, the debates or discussions we've had as a body. So I absolutely think this fits within the role of the select board, especially since we're the ones that basically put things on the ballot. So I appreciate your opinion, but I strongly disagree.
Other thoughts?
I would like to move this to a forwarding agenda. There is a deliberation and a decision that I want to make, and I'm not prepared to make it tonight.
Okay.
So I would like to move this forward.
Okay, so
So that moves it to the 20th.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, because Mr. Sidney will not be here on the 6th. All right, is that acceptable? I mean, that it is what it is.
The only thing I would say, it's acceptable to me, the only thing I would say is that it's analogous, and from my opinion, that the legislative arm puts together a committee and they come up with recommendations and they endorse those recommendations in a committee report. They present it to the legislative body votes on it. We commissioned a report, we put together a committee that we appointed. They came out with a report that suggested that this was a prudent method of moving forward. And I like the idea of having belts and suspenders. So if we have two processes that are working in concert and working around the same time, we're bound to get to a good place at some point. It may not be this town meeting, it may not be an election in March there's so many ifs that if we just keep waiting and waiting and waiting until the right time, I just don't see us ever making changes that are going to make our government more equitable, efficient, efficacious, or responsive to the needs of residents.
Let me be clear. I'm not against the Charter Commission. I'm actually for the Charter Commission. I'm just talking about the role of this board in supporting or not supporting the Charter Commission. I personally support it as a citizen. As a town meeting member and legislator, I support it. All of that's true. I think that this board should be doing the business of the town until it isn't a board anymore, or continues to be a board. And I think that it's just my opinion that we should stay above the fray, essentially.
I understand that, Mr. Sidney, but this board's business is to set up ad hoc committees to look at policies and make recommendations. And so this board did that, and that committee had a recommendation, and I think we should take a vote on endorsing it.
If I may.
And I don't have anything else.
Joseph.
I think I respect my colleague's opinion, but this board has also been provided legal guidance by counsel that on matters specific to a form of governance, the select board does have more latitude to take a stand, unlike other political issues. Right. So it is within our purview under Mass General Law that we have the right to do so. I also what was not lost on me was a previous speaker and under a different topic. I'm speculating, tongue-in-cheek, was proud to have 2 annual town meetings to keep coming back to. As the executive branch representatives to this community, what I also felt was understated in the Town Governance Study Committee was the impact of our current form of government on staff and our ability to get the work of the community done. That is by far our most important role. And I take that responsibility very seriously, and that's part of what motivates me here tonight. Again, I'm not making a prescriptive approach to what the board should support in terms of change. This is only asking to give the voters a choice by putting it on the ballot. And again, I understand my colleagues' concerns about that politically, but we have checked with council. And again, that's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
Sure. So, in conclusion, we'll pick this up again in the September 20th meeting. So let's move on to the consent agenda.
All right.
Please.
So I'm going to read the items of the consent agenda and ask if anybody wants to pull anything. There are a whole bunch of them, all the way to I. A, approve request from Friends of Natick Trails for the 3rd annual New Year's Eve event on the Cochituate Rail Trail contingent upon approval by the town administrator. Approve request to hold a block party from Jennifer Hall on Saturday, September 20th, 2023, rain date October 1st, 2023. Approve request from Natick 180 to hang a banner for National Recovery Month from September 25th through September 30th, 2023. Approve Safety Committee recommendations submitted by Chief Hicks. Approve meeting minutes. 1, open session meeting minutes of March 22nd, 2023. 2, open session meeting minutes of March 29th, 2023. F, ratify vote to approve a 1-day alcohol license for Natick AmVets Post 79 on August 27th. G, approve the following amendments to the change of Lookout Farms license. One, amended to allow the service of beer and wine at the Barnyard Play Area, the location being to the west of the U-Barn, and which has a space no greater than 68,687 feet and an occupancy to exceed 1,452 people. Hours of service are to be from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., Tuesday through Sunday, and Monday holidays from September 1st to November 1st. Amended hours for U-Barn to be 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., Tuesday through Sunday, and holiday Mondays from May 1st to October 31st. Amended hours for the tap room to be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. year-round, and patio number 1 and patio number 2 from March 1st to November 30th, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. from March 1st through November 30th. H, accept resignation from Liz Smith-Friedman from the Keefe Tech School Committee. I, approve request from Natick Recreation and Parks to reserve the Natick Common for the Johnson Elementary School PTO Family Science Night on Sunday, September 24th, 2023, from 1 to 4 p.m. Anybody want to pull anything?
I'd like to pull item F. And I'll be quick.
Okay.
And I'd also like to pull item G.
Item D, as in
G is in,
G.
Go for
green.
Okay. So we're pulling F and G.
G, yep.
So I move approval of the consent agenda items A through E, H, and I.
Great, H, I. I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, item F, Ms. Coughlin.
Just, there was a bit of concern about the difficulties AMVETS has had in getting its house in order. I just wanted to report to the board that since our tersely worded, or the chair's tersely worded letter to the Post 79, they have submitted 3 one-day alcohol licenses, and on September 11th, we'll be submitting all of the documents to be updated with the ABCC and the and for a permanent outdoor license. So there should be really no more problems going forward. But I am impressed they got 3 of them out, and those are for November and September events. Just good news.
You going to move approval?
Yes, I move approval for item F.
I'll second that. I also just wanted to comment, if I'd known that my ghostwriter's letter would have been so effective, I would have penned it a lot sooner.
I wrote a terse letter.
In discussion?
Sure.
May. Thank you, and I will support the motion here. I just, and part of why I pulled item G as well is just I don't have much to say about that other than what I'm going to say here. I think matters regarding alcohol policies are, in most cases, require or should require more discussion in the discussion and deliberation part of our agenda. I'm just concerned about the precedent of putting something in the consent agenda or approving something after the fact, that we're sending the wrong message to the community. This board participates in Natick 180. I know from my previous term on the board, we actually almost put in jeopardy a very, very well-populated event by the Phantom Gourmet. We had to call an emergency meeting of the select board. We accommodated them, not happily, but with very short notice to put a permit in place. I'm concerned about the precedent it sets for other applicants, and especially when it comes to licensing, it's a slippery slope. So my preference is to not do this moving forward. I understand you might have gotten different feedback from what other boards have done, but that has probably happened since I served in the past. Yeah. Given the issue of alcohol in this community, I think it warrants at least, I don't expect them to be challenged. I appreciate the deputy chief's attention to these things. I just want to make sure procedurally that we're seeing them ahead of time, even if it requires calling a special meeting.
Yeah. Duly noted. That's all I can say on that topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve that?
It's all set.
That was
Catherine and Paul.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Catherine and you.
Yeah,
you
seconded it.
Right, but that was F and not G, right?
Yeah, we haven't voted F yet.
That's what I'm talking about.
I moved F. Then
You moved
Yes.
F, Bruce seconded it, this was discussion, so now we're looking for a vote on
We
it.
need a vote.
We need to vote.
On F.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, right. To G.
Sorry, just keeping us on track.
I'll move approval of G, and again, my only comment for pulling it out was consistent with what I previously
I'll second
said. Tremendous community partner in proactivity. I think Lookout Farm has demonstrated its commitment to responsible service and proudly support this.
Yep.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right. Now, if anyone's a glutton for punishment, town administrator notes?
I'll be extremely brief. You may have heard, or you may not have heard, Natick, we finally got our updated subsidized housing inventory numbers through 40B. We are below 10% by approximately 63 units. This was actually targeted or tracked, and it's consistent with what we've been tracking for the last 8+ years. We're expecting to be below between 50 to 70, 40 to 60, depending on the year and the development. So it's actually consistent with what we're expecting. With that said, when the updated list came out, we noticed that there were a number of projects that either have already been permitted and are in the pipeline, or are in some form of development that are not on the list yet. So we are working with our RHSO to get those on the list. The list only just came out a couple weeks ago, and so it's still in process. With those units, we're hopeful that will be back above 10% or right at 10%. Those projects include, for example, a couple of the units at the Greystone project off of Cottage Street, St. Pat's, that was a 40B project. Now it's a hole in the ground and it's under construction. Some of the other projects in Natick Center that are under some form of construction, like Washington, although that's a bit on pause, but that's still under construction, and others in town. Second, buoys at the dam. There was a request by some residents regarding the buoys at the dam. That was a recommendation from a GZA report as part of an inspection. We have been working with GZA to understand what that item was that they put into their report. It was kind of amusing when we asked them. They kind of said, we need to look into that more. So they are looking into that more to see what that would mean. It could require something simple, but it could be more complex depending on what the recommendations are and what the requirements would be from either GZA's recommendations or others at the state, depending on what that means. For example, if we need to impact any of the ground, it might require permitting through the Conservation Commission and the like. Just wanted you all to know that as an update, because it is something that has been asked of board members through email and other avenues. We are aware of it, and we have been working to implement. We just need to know what they meant by that recommendation and how to actually implement. There might also be some short-term solutions versus longer-term solutions, depending on what the recommendation is, given the direction that we're going with that project. Two other things, CED updates. You'll notice some new people in the Community and Economic Development Office. One new person started last week or 2 weeks ago. Actually, two new people started 2 weeks ago, a new admin assistant and a new associate planner. The associate planner is a recent graduate in their master's from UMass Amherst in the program that I actually went through. So it's a great, great program. We're going to be well served. The other is an administrative assistant. I don't know much of his background, but stop in, say hi. We'll actually have a new person starting next week as well, our transportation and economic development planner, who will be starting next week. So that'll allow us to better tackle and be more proactive with our transportation goals and objectives for the town. I know that was a topic this evening. It's been a long time coming. Those positions, several of those positions, coming out of the pandemic, we tried multiple times to recruit for and just had no applicants. We took a step back, rewrote some jobs, restructured the department a little bit, and then we were able to finally get some applicants. Some of it's just timing, some of it's just economies, some of it is just, we're fortunate to have applicants. We didn't have a lot of applicants, but we had some good applicants, so that was really good to see. Projects in that department are advancing as well, such as the Main Street redesign. We have some concepts that we're going to be hopefully bringing to the public with partnership with Athena and others in the coming weeks or months. Very, very high level at this point, nothing in the ground. Obviously, we only have concept funding anyway through a grant from the state. And that's really from Cottage Street to North Avenue. So just the stretch right here. West Natick Economic Development Study. We did a walk last week with our consultants just to jumpstart their work on the project. They're going to be doing just existing condition analysis and some outreach to property owners and developers. But you'll start seeing some work on that in the field. So if you hear from people, just let them know we're starting and we're going to be moving that along. Golden Triangle, as I mentioned previously, we put that a little bit on pause. I feel like now with our capacity being built up and some of the work that we were waiting for, such as Mass DOT was doing a pedestrian bike mobility study on Route 9 and some other work. I'm confident that in the coming months we'll be able to just basically bring that right back to the forefront. It was not given all the things that were happening post-pandemic in that area, both positive and also just understanding the economies. We wanted to make sure we had the right scope of work. So we just we were trying to work through that with a consultant team, but we weren't quite getting what we felt we needed. So we wanted to just pause for just a little bit and then we can bring it back. And just the final thing was we had a great zip trip, but we kind of already mentioned that on last Friday. And I want to give kudos to Jay Peropatich who helped put that on. And for those who were there, we also had police, fire, Natick 180, community services, Natick Center Associates, Rep. Linsky. It was a very wet but very fun morning because it was very rainy.
Thank you, Jim. Anything else?
Just a quick question. When do you expect to have an SHI update from our...
When do we expect an SHI update? Our hope is within the next couple weeks, but they have been getting the paperwork. Some of this is paperwork driven, so you need to actually get, depending on the type of unit, you need to get the actual deed restrictions and everything. Most of that's already been submitted to DHCD, so we were kind of surprised to not see some of these on there. But it should be in the coming days or weeks. Yeah. It's the recent, we just joined this RHSO, if you recall, this board voted to enter into that. Liz Russ is the person that we're working with. So she has all the information. She's now working with DHCD. I suspect DHCD is also, well, it's a new agency now. They just changed their name. I'm blanking on the acronym. But I suspect, it's a new acronym. But I suspect because they released this recently that they're getting inundated with a lot of communities putting some additional information in there. So I'm not concerned yet about the delay. Plus, I feel like we have a very strong case to claim what's called safe harbor status under Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, because we know we have, for example, Greystone Lane and some other projects that are not on there that we would be allowed to show are on there in order to continue to be in that safe harbor status.
Good. Awesome.
Sorry, I meant St. Patrick's. Greystone.
Okay. Select board concerns.
Too many to list. I'll just bring them back in September.
I just have a couple, and these are very quick, and it's going to be just I'll be sending out emails on this. One was an email that I sent out that all of you were kind enough to respond to about Natick Days and Youth Health Act coverage. So I will try to put together a schedule that accommodates everybody's wishes. The other is to try to schedule a retreat. And what I'll do is I'll put out a doodle poll of some days and just say, all right, which of these can we not do? Or can do and cannot do? That was it. Okay. Correspondence, do we have anything? Sorry.
One more thing to put on your plate, Mr. Chair.
Not another thing.
Ongoing farmers market schedule. I think our current schedule has expired, so we don't know who's going when for the next few months. I think it's a good thing to keep doing.
I think we're pretty good for Natick Days, but after that, I agree. What I wanted to do is get coverage through prior to them going indoors on there. As long as the weather cooperates, we'll hopefully be out there every other week. So that actually will be an easier schedule to put together because we have the Community Senior Center one, and whatever that 2-week interval is that's offsets that, we can have slots and people can say yes, no for those. So I'll do another, that'll be more a spreadsheet, not a doodle poll.
And then one more thing. Committee committee assignments.
Yes.
So I do know that the chair has sent out emails in the past asking which committees we wish to be assigned to. Those need to be assigned.
Okay. That actually, I had that as part of the retreat scheduling for goals, committee assignments, and norms.
Great.
So we're on the same page. Anything else you want to put on my plate? No, I'm just kidding.
A motion to adjourn.
Writing those letters for
No, I'm just kidding. She's a very good agitated writer that just terse to the point, just like, don't mess up again. All right, we're on the air. I shouldn't do that. All right.
Move to
Do I
adjourn?
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you
That
very
was
much.
Catherine, you seconded,
Catherine,
right?
yes.
Seconded that,
Yep.
yes.
Rich
Loudly
and Catherine, enthusiastic. All right, thanks, everybody. Sorry it was so late.